Hello there, YouTubers. It's Gus Estacio from Healing X Outreach. Back at it again. It is Holy Monday. And because I'm going to be in my car and I'm on my way to work, I don't need to put on my mask yet. I will have my mask on when I get to work. Part 2 on how the Jehovah's Witnesses are like the Gnostics, or a reprisal of ancient Gnosticism. And this is fitting with the fact that we are in Holy Week celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I will have in the description below a live stream I did on resurrection or recreation about the ancient Gnostic teaching about the resurrection, or actually about Jesus Christ not coming in the flesh. The Epistle of John says that the AntiChrist Spirit is a denial of Christ coming in the flesh. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are the AntiChrist Spirit. Those who cling to Gnostic teaching, to the Gnostics, to the Nag Hammadi collection, are regurgitating Jehovah Witness teaching, which is largely Gnostic. One of the main purveyors of Gnostic teaching, or one of the main courses, apart from just its anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, against the Old Testament God, early on was a thing called Docetism. In fact, Docetism was Ignatius of Antioch's main attack. That is, that he attacked the Docetists, and the early church was very much against Docetism and the Docetists, who were Antimaterialists. The Jehovah's Witnesses, I always say, are like religion clothed in atheism. The Docetists, or the ancient Gnostics, were anti-materialists. In fact, some of the Gnostics were so anti-materialism that they would starve themselves to death. So Docetism not only denied that Jesus came in the flesh, that he was possibly just a spirit the entire time he was here on the earth, it also led to angel Christology, which was heralded by Arius and Arianism and the Ebionites. It became very popular to believe that Jesus was not a human being. So Jesus' resurrection, therefore, was not a physical or bodily resurrection. It was spiritual. So here you have the Jehovah's Witnesses, who also mimic aspects of Docetism, because they deny Jesus' bodily resurrection. For those of you who are old-timers, you might remember this. The Jehovah's Witnesses believe, of course, Jesus had a spiritual body. And there's a reason for that. In the book of Corinthians, I believe it is 1 Corinthians chapter 14, or is it's chapter 14, where it talks about the resurrection of Jesus being the equivalent to a creature that is in a in a cocoon, and it says that there are those who have earthly bodies and those who have spiritual bodies. I discussed this with great length and exhaustiveness in my live stream on what the Bible means by spiritual body and earthly body, and how Paul the Apostle references spiritual body not as an ethereal, that it's not trying to say that Jesus had a body and that we will have bodies that will be ethereal. Ethereal as in untouchable, as in not physical. So, the Jehovah Witness teaching on the resurrection of Jesus, excuse me, is that water went down the wrong windpipe. Was that, of course, that his body kind of just dissipated like gases, and so Jesus' body in the tomb just dissipated like gases. And then whenever he made appearances, like to Thomas, where Thomas touches the wounds in his side and his hands or in his feet, or when he appears to Mary, he reconvenes his molecules so that they could touch him or they could see him physically. So the Jehovah Witness explanation is, of course, Jesus had an ethereal body and he could remoleculize himself at times just to show that he had conquered death. That is not the biblical bodily resurrection. The very fact that we teach the resurrection, which the early Christians taught, was the fact that resurrection in of itself, the word means to bring back. What are you bringing back? You're bringing back that which was dead to life. So does that mean necessarily that we're going to be brought back with all ailments, and is Gus over here is going to look like a fat guy when he's brought back in the resurrection? No, that is not the teaching of the Christian resurrection. As I said, the Docetists, the Gnostics, and the group called the Docetists of the Gnostics were Antimaterialists. They believed that flesh was evil. And so they believed Jesus could not have been in the flesh because that would be evil. That is, that he would be taking on something which was imperfect and evil by taking on biological physicality. So the Jehovah's Witnesses also imitate that in a sense, in the fact that they, of course, deny Jesus had a bodily resurrection. This is a form of Docetism. It is Gnostic teaching. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are a reprisal of the anti-Semitism of the ancient Gnostics, even though they accept the Old Testament God. That is, that they replace the Old Testament people. And that's why they call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. The Jews are lost forever, and Jehovah's Witnesses are the replacement of all the Jews. They are the favor of God, replacing the people of God in the Old Testament. And then you have, of course, the people of God in the New Testament, also the Jews, who are forsaken because they, said, no, we don't want Jesus. May his curse be upon us and our children's children. Also, they are a reprisal of ancient Docetist Gnosticism and its teaching on the resurrection, because they believe, of course, Jesus was not resurrected in his body, that his body was cast aside, and that he, like Star Trek, got it. Those of you who remember the old Star Trek, you would get into these tubes, and they would make your molecules disappear, and then make it reconvey on the planet that Captain Kirk was going to. So they believe in like a remolecularization for convenience of appearance, but that Jesus is once again in heaven, an angel, a spiritual being, spiritual meaning ethereal. Now, I think in my live stream, one of my main arguments for spiritual not meaning a lack of physicality is that in the same chapter, 1 Corinthians, in the same book, I believe it is chapter 10, verses 3 and 4, it says that the bread which they ate in the wilderness was spiritual bread. And that here it was provided by, of course, Jesus. Jesus fed them in the wilderness with spiritual bread and spiritual drink, which, of course, is relating to the fact that Moses made water come out of the rock. Not that he did it, but yeah, Moses, through the power of Yahweh, had water come out of a rock that gave them fresh water. Well, the fact is, we have manna in the wilderness, which is relating to spiritual bread. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3 and 4, and it's talking about water, physical water. So spiritual doesn't mean ethereal when Paul is speaking about spiritual in the book of Corinthians. He's talking about spiritual in the same sense of something from heaven or something of a divine source. As in, when we say that's a spiritual man or a spiritual dude, we're not saying the guy is a spirit. We're saying the guy is a holy guy. He's, really in touch with God. He has wisdom from heaven or wisdom from God, basically by the life he lives or by the way he speaks at all times. He's a spiritual man. So here we use that term even in modern day English, not to indicate ethereal or untouchableness, but the condition of someone being in touch with heavenly things. And that's how Paul uses it, and I use other various texts of scripture that proves that point. So it will be in the description box below. I'm not going to be able to put it in right now. Actually, I will. Yeah, I'll put it in a little bit later. So if you don't see it in the description, just come back later, or you can look in the video archives for a live stream that I did. It was called Resurrection or Recreation. And it's a discussion about the Watchtower and the difference between the Watchtower's Gnostic Docetist teaching and the Easter message, which Christians announce this week, they will especially celebrate on Easter Sunday, which is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In fact, the term Easter comes from the German word Oster, which is where we get the word Easter from. And, excuse me, they're trying to repave this road here, so it's messed up. You know, they haven't put the tar. You know, here comes the bump. There you go. Now you hear the mess. It's gone away. Anyway, so Ostern actually is a word to describe to rise. To rise as the sun rises where? In the east. And that's where we get the word Easter from the German word Oster. And Ostern is in relation to the Hebrew Paschal, which is the word Passover. So Easter actually is saying Passover, but it is also saying to rise. It's related to the Passover in the German language, and it is related to the message of Easter or resurrection, because it means to rise, as in the east. So there's a little Easter tidbit for this week. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are a reprisal of the Nag Hammadi groups in various ways. I will speak on a third way, which has to do with their view of who Jesus is. I spoke a little bit here, but I'll speak more of it maybe a little bit later in the week. You all have a happy, holy Monday. Be safe if you are leaving the home, and God bless. Bye-bye.